All right, well, let's take a look at Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11. So if you were with us last time, um, we got to look at chapter 10 and we got to see an angel fight. I told you that's cooler than anything Hollywood could produce. I told you to go to work. So did anybody take me up on that? Anybody go to work and say, hey, you think you watched cool TV this past week? I went to church and learned about an angel fight. So I don't know. You actually did? You actually did. That's cool. I mean, I just think that's cool. Hey, the Bible is exciting. And this is not preacher speak, okay? I mean, I know preachers are supposed to hype up the Bible like a used car salesman, hypes up an old Pinto or something, but I'm telling you, the Bible is cool. And studying the Bible, I want you to get excited about studying the Bible because it's exciting. And I want you to have a passion about studying God's Word because it is exciting. So so in chapter 10, Daniel is praying and fasting, and an angel shows up and he says, hey, I came just as soon, I was sent just as soon as you started praying, but I was detained because the prince of Persia, I was in a bit of a scuffle, my paraphrase there, with the prince of Persia, and we talked about angels and demons and all of that. We talked about that, but he said, I've come that I can make you know the truth about what is about to happen, and then I've got to get back to the fight. Because I've kind of left Michael. This is a extreme paraphrase on my part, but he basically says, "Well, I've left Michael there fighting with the Prince of Persia, and I've come just long enough to make you know, the truth about what's going to happen to your people here in the coming days and in the end. And then I've got to get back to the fight because I've left Michael there alone with the fight." That's kind of where we left off at the end of chapter 10. So chapter 11 is pretty much the angel making known to him this explanation of how history is going to play itself out. All right. So we're going to pick up with verse 2, and we're only going to look at about half of chapter 11 tonight. And then we'll pick up there when we come back after Thanksgiving break. So let's look at verse 2. And remember, we read actually through verse 1 of chapter 11 because we said it actually tied in with what was being said in verse 21 of chapter 10. So we're picking up now with verse 2. "And now I will tell you, says the angel, the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these." Okay, so chapter 11 really contains the contents of the vision that's introduced in chapter 10. So you get the angel showing up, and he says, I'm going to give you a vision. I'm going to give you a revelation of what's about to happen. That's chapter 10. The contents of that is found in chapter 11, and it actually provides us one of the most detailed predictions of history in all of Scripture. I mean, almost point by point, king by king. It's difficult to read this and place it with history and not say, man, the Bible is real and God is real because God calls his shot just time. Not with one incident, but incident after incident after incident through this thing, through history. So it's really amazing. It's what causes some people to say, well, Daniel must have been written, very late, after the Roman period, because how could Daniel have known all of these precise predictions? But we would say, well, no, it wasn't written that late. He knew it because God revealed it to him. But it is a miraculous revelation of history. So he begins with a description of the Persian king. Now, you think that's true or false? He begins with a description of the Persian king because that's who was currently ruling at the time. True. You got a 50-50 chance of getting it right, okay? Yeah, it's true. And we'll see that. It's usually whatever kingdom is in charge at the time, that's where that's where he starts his prediction. Now, do we have our little graphic, Phil, that we can put up there? Our little picture that we... All right. So, as we've worked through our study, does this look familiar to you? All right. So, we've worked over... So, at first, when we did Daniel 2, I gave you this, just the statue. And we said, okay, well, head of gold, Babylon, then followed by the Medes and the Persians, Greece, Rome, and then the kingdom that's to rise out of that into the Antichrist and the coming of Christ. And then we laid the vision of chapter 7 on that, and the lion and the bear and the Greek. But we saw how it's still related to Babylon, Medes, Persia. So same story, different visions. We get to Daniel 8, he starts with the Medes and the Persians because that's who was in charge at the time, and then works it down. We get now this character, Antiochus Epiphanes, that we've talked about in great length. We get him, the little horn that grows. We talked about that. So now, this revelation by the angel in chapter 11, it's going to fit in this overall scheme of history. But notice we're not getting vision, we're not getting statues or animals or anything. The angel is just rattling it off. Here's what's going to happen. And so we don't have any cool little animals or three-headed goats or anything like that. We just have, the kingdoms being described. And we start with the Medes and the Persians, 4 kings there, and then he works himself down from there into Greece and on from there. Okay? Clear as mud? So I gave you a copy of this in your packet as well as being able to look up there and see it. So what king are we starting with? The Persian king that we're going to start with is what? Now you can give me one of 2 names because it's the same guy called by 2 different names. So what you got? Now that's Greece. We're looking Medes and Persians. What did you say? Darius, who's also sometimes known as what? Cyrus. That's right. So Darius/Cyrus, that's where we're beginning. Roll off 4, and we're going to end with the one that's his strength far richer than them all, and by his strength and riches he will stir up the realm of Greece. So that would be the great, rich, strong Persian king will be, starts with an X. Xerxes. See, I give it away when I said, how many kings do you know that start with X? See, that's kind of a gimme there. So he's going to stir up Greece. So we have these list of 4 Persian kings, Medes and Persians. Then we're going to Greece. Then we get a mighty king that will arise in Greece that will rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And the mighty king of Greece is who? Now we can have your answer. Alexander the Great. You just was one step ahead of me there. Alexander the Great. And we've taken our little picture down again. But anyway, so if you look on here, there it is. Okay, so Alexander the Great would be the represented by in chapter 8. You see the goat with the one horn. The goat, Alexander the horn, Alexander the Great, the goat representing Greece. All right, so now we get the mighty king here. So what I'm wanting you to see with this is that it's not telling a new story. It's telling the same story from a different perspective, a different way of looking at it. But it's still the story of how history is going to play itself out. You still got this progression of kingdoms. We're just getting some more details on it, all right? So Alexander the Great is the king of Greece that will appear. Now look at verse 4. When he has arisen, his kingdom, we're talking about Alexander the Great, shall be broken up and divided toward the four winds of heaven, but not among his posterity. In other words, not among his descendants with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. So how was this fulfilled? Yeah, it's divided up. So Alexander the Great dies of a fever in 323 BC. Interesting, he doesn't die in battle. He dies of a fever, and his empire is divided into four sections and given to four of his military commanders, four of his generals. What happened to Alexander's sons that might have been emperor in his stead? Well, they were both murdered. So you see a remarkable fulfillment of the prophecy. Now remember, when this is being prophesied, you don't have an Alexander the Great. You don't have Greece being a major player at this point. It's the Medes and the Persians. God is calling his shot and not only saying who will take over when the Medes and Persians are done, God is actually giving the revelation of how this great emperor of Greece will fall and how his kingdom will be divided. Remarkable, really. Questions on that? All right, now we're gonna get into something that we're gonna wade through a little bit. And you're going to think as we're reading through this, there's no way in the world I'm going to understand this. We're not going to jump so far in that we're going to lose ourselves in it. We're going to read it, but then we're going to kind of back up and look at big picture of what this is being described. And then I gave you another handout that if you're really interested in how all this plays out, it's got the verses and then the timeline of this. All right. So we're gonna read this. So before we jump in this, here's what you need to remember. This is the main thing you need to remember, because it's going to talk about the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. The kingdom of the north is talking about the area of Syria and the kingdom of Syria. And the kings that are controlling that kingdom of the north, that is Syria, is the Seleucids or Seleucids, however you want to pronounce that, all right? So anything that references the north, we're talking about Syria and the Seleucids, okay? Anything talking about the kingdom of the south, we're talking about Egypt, all right? That area of Egypt, the kingdom of Egypt. And Egypt at that time were ruled by the Ptolemy dynasty. So anything that's a reference to the kingdom of the south is a reference to the Ptolemies, okay? And that's spelled with a P, P-T-O-L-E-M-I-E-S, Ptolemies. And this verse 5 and beyond is a description of this ongoing battle between the Ptolemies of Egypt in the south and the Seleucids of the kingdom of Syria in the north. So that's what I want you to understand, big picture. That's what's being described. Because when we start reading this, your head's going to swim, all right? And you're going to go, what in the world? Because it's going to be talking about the daughter of the king of the north and this and that and all. And you're going to go, what in the world? Just remember, kingdom of the north, Syria, the Seleucids, kingdom of the south, Egypt, the Ptolemies, and they're in conflict with one another, and that's what's being described. So this is all taking place at the conclusion of the Greek Empire, okay? So this is what, so if you look at the little graphic that keeps going away, so we're now talking about this, primarily this, the four little horns, which really isn't, I mean, in your little graphic, it's got this being Rome. It's really not Rome. It's before Rome, but it's the Seleucids is the kingdom that one in particular that we're interested in, and that's Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a Seleucid, kingdom of the north, Syria, and the Ptolemies were the challenge in the south. So all of this took place prior to really the rise of Rome. So we're talking about a period of time between Greece and Rome where Alexander's kingdom is split and everybody is vying for power, the Ptolemies to the south and the Seleucids to the north. You with me so far? Yes, sir. Yes. Right. That's right. Because, and the reason is because in um, in the other visions, we don't deal with the Ptolemies. We only deal with the Seleucids. So in chapter 7 and 8, you're only dealing with the Seleucids and Antiochus Epiphanes. He's the little horn that grew great. That's why. So it's a reference to, and maybe this little graphic here isn't clear because we don't put the south, but really we should beside it should be king of the south too because they're being talked about simultaneously. But it's said king of the north because in chapters 7 and 8 we're only dealing with the kingdom of the north. We don't deal with the kingdom of the south, so you can't really lay it against it because we haven't talked about it yet. So, all right, well, let's dig in. I'm telling you, it's going to be a little bit. It's going to make your head swim a little bit, but let's dig in for fun's sake. Verse 5. Also, the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes. Remember, this is the Ptolemies, Egypt. He shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. At the end of some years, they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement. In other words, the Ptolemies are going to try to make an agreement with the Seleucids, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, neither nor he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. Verse 7, but from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, that's the Seleucids, and deal with them and prevail. He shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. Let's stop there. So you see, it's just describing this. You know, you got an attack by the Ptolemies on the Seleucids, and you got like a counter by the Seleucids to the Ptolemies. It's this ongoing conflict that's being described here. So if you look at your little fill in the blank here, verse 5 through 19 comprise a history of the conflict between two divisions of the Greek Empire, the Ptolemies, Ptolemies, or Egyptian, and the Seleucids, Seleucids, Syrian. So in these verses, the king of the south refers to Ptolemy I, and one of his commanders refers to Seleucus I. All right. And again, I want to refer you back to this, because this is like the most concise outline that I can give you as to, okay, this king was this king was Ptolemy, and he reigned here, and that's what these verses are talking about. And this guy ruled with the Seleucids, and that's what this verse is talking about. So it's very concise. If you just want to dig in, and drown yourself in Scripture, in history, this is what I'm going to refer you to. We're just going to kind of hit it and skim over the top of it and roll on, because unless you are a ancient history major, you're gonna be lost pretty quickly there. But that's your guide to try to put the pieces together. So, like I was saying, in these verses, the kingdom of the south would be what? Egypt, the Ptolemies, Egypt. And the kingdom of the north would be the Seleucids, or what? Syria. That's the big thing you need to remember. And what's being described is an ongoing conflict between the two kingdoms. That's the big picture. If you get the big picture, then you understand what's being described. All right. And then we get to verse 10, and we get a prophecy concerning Syria, or the Seleucids in the north. Now, this is going to be significant. We're more concerned with the Seleucids than the Ptolemies. Why? Because Antiochus Epiphanes is coming out of the Seleucids, and he's going to be the type and shadow of the Antichrist, as we've talked about before. So it's not that we're unconcerned with the Ptolemies, but we're going to be, for biblical study purposes, we're more concerned with the Seleucids, because out of the Seleucid dynasty comes Antiochus Epiphanes, and he is the one that is the type and shadow of the Antichrist. So verse 10, we get this prophecy about Syria. Questions on those verses? All right. I didn't, like I said, we didn't go swimming very long right there. We just kind of hit it and kept rolling. But I gave you the tools that if you want to dig deeper, you certainly have the tools to be able to do that. Let's look on to verse 10. However, his son shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. The king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up. He will cast down tens of thousands, but will not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times, many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. This is talking about the triumph of the Seleucids over the Ptolemies. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land. Now, where's that? Israel. With destruction in his power. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. After this he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end. And with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. All right, so that makes perfect sense, right? Y'all got all that, right? I told you, your head will swim a little bit. All right, but we're going to kind of back up, look at the big picture, and if we can get the big picture, then we can understand what's being said. If you want to dig deeper, I've given you the tools to be able to do that, all right? So verse 10 through 12 describes a great victory of that the Ptolemies had over the Seleucid kingdom. But what was the result of this victory? What does it say about the king? I'm in let's look at verse 10. Verse 11. Verse 12. When he is taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up. So what happened with the king? His heart was filled with pride. So that's the idea there. Now, verse 13 begins a period of Seleucid dominance. So you've got up till verse 13, you've got this struggle for power. When Alexander the Great dies, there's this power vacuum. And so there's this struggle for power between the Ptolemies in the south and the Seleucids in the north, and they're vying for power. But picking up with about verse 13, you see the Seleucids coming to power. And so now it's not going to be so much about the Ptolemies, but the Seleucids have pretty much exerted themselves as supreme at this point. Now, why is this significant? Well, the most significant thing about the Seleucid dynasty is that this is the dynasty that Antiochus Epiphanes would come from, the arch enemy to God's people. This is the one that we've talked about before, the little horn in chapter 7 and 8. The one that exalts himself against God and his people. This is the guy that slaughters a pig on the altar of the temple in Jerusalem and erects a statue of Zeus. The Jews hated him, and so this is kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but in between the time period of the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's some Jewish heroes called the Maccabees, Judas Maccabeus and his brother, and they go and they do this daring raid without proper weapons or anything, and they kick Antiochus Epiphanes' forces out of the temple and out of Jerusalem, and they win this battle, and so they go to rededicate the temple and the altar so that they can have sacrifice to the Lord again and worship the Lord again. And in order to rededicate and cleanse the temple, the lamps in the temple have to burn for like 7 days or 8 days. I think it's 7 days, but anyway. And they only found just a little bit of oil, just a little bit, maybe just not even enough for 1 day. And so, but they use that oil and they begin the cleansing process, and miraculously the oil burns for all 7 days or 8 days, and it doesn't burn out. The oil doesn't run out, and it's this miracle, and it's known as the miracle of lights, or the miracle of the oil. And Jews to this day still celebrate this holiday, this holy day, this miracle of the dedication of the temple, the rededication of the temple, and they call it what? Hanukkah. So when you hear about our Jewish friends, I'm not going to say our Jewish brothers, our Jewish friends, that are celebrating Hanukkah this season, you'll say, hey, I know what that's about. That's about the miracle of the oil that never ran out. But who they were fighting against was this Antiochus Epiphanes, this enemy to God's people. Now, we've seen before that this Antiochus Epiphanes, and even Jesus in Matthew 24, as we looked at, I think last time or time before, he even picks up on this character and presents him as a type of Antichrist. In other words, he's saying at the end, when the Antichrist rises, comes to power, he's going to look like this. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes wasn't the Antichrist, but he was a type of Antichrist. He was a picture of Antichrist and what he would look like. And so that's why this is significant. And it's all pointing back to the same thing. So if you pull out your little picture again, you know you got the Antichrist, coming with in the feet of the statue, iron mixed with clay, that is representative of the 10 horns, the little horn that speaks blasphemy. It's Antiochus Epiphanes, but it's also the Antichrist. It's a picture of one and the same. The little horn of chapter 8 is Antiochus Epiphanes. The one that grows great and speaks blasphemy is the same one as the king, the blasphemous king that's coming out of the Seleucid dynasty. So it's all the same. It's all telling and teaching the same story of history, just in a different way. So when you keep that in mind, it's easier to understand that, look, this is not some new thing that's being told that's completely different. It's the same story, just told from a different perspective. That makes sense? All right. So questions on those verses. And again, I just kind of hit the high points. You can dig deeper if you want to, but I'm just hitting the high points there. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of summary questions. What's the main point of the prophecies of these verses? Well, to show that God's in control of history, and that He's directing the history of His people. And I think that's significant. And my goodness, it's significant in times like these that we're living in, where it seems as though evil is winning the day. And you think, man, what is going on? And where is God in all of this? Well, God is at work, and He is controlling history, and He is directing the history of His people, which is us. We're a part of that. So that's significant, and that's encouragement. What encouragement can we draw from these verses? What do you think? God is in control. I said this, though the world may seem chaotic, nothing takes God by surprise. He didn't have to wait for the recounts and all of that to figure out who the next president was going to be. He already knew. Nothing takes God by surprise. God knows and cares what's happening to His people. I think that's encouraging, because that means He knows and cares what's happening to us. He's in complete control. Did you catch that? He's in complete control, and God will defeat evil, and good will defeat evil in the end. And I think that's significant, and that's encouraging, because sometimes as you look around you today, it may seem as though evil is winning the day. And while evil may win the battle in the short run, good's gonna win out in the end. God's gonna win the war. I promise you that. So anyway, some encouragement that we take from that. So that's like the first half of chapter 11, a lot of very intricate description of history, but I've kind of given you an overview of what it's talking about. All right. Questions? Comments? All right, so next Wednesday night, we won't be having services due to the Thanksgiving holiday. So we'll pick up the following Wednesday night and finish up chapter 11. We're almost done with Daniel. I've got about 3 or so more lessons in it, and we'll be done. I don't imagine that you will know all there is to know about the book of Daniel, but my goal is that you would know more than you would have known before we started the study. And if we can say that, then we're making progress. Well, I don't know for sure, other than I think it just wanted to make it, emphatic that that he's repeating it so that it won't be a fluke. I mean, nobody will say, well, he just it's just a fluke. And then remember, this is apocalyptic, and so this is something done in such a way that God's people know, but the powers, those in power, wouldn't, and so it's done in code, sort of. It's done in puzzle-like form, and so sometimes you have to give different pieces of the puzzle to get it all. Plus, there's more details. Like in chapter 2, we don't get really all about the Seleucids. We don't get Antiochus Epiphanes. We just get a broad picture, and then as we go through, it's like you're looking in a microscope, and each click of the microscope, you get a little bit more detail and a little bit more detail. So by the time you get to chapter 11, you're getting a lot more detail than what we got in chapter 2. Anything else? All right, well, I've enjoyed studying with you. Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly